So I'm just back from Fully Charged Live in Farnborough, and in this video we're going to talk about some of the stuff that I saw that was different from last year. So I've just come back from the Fully Charged show down in Farnborough. We took the MG ZS EV down, and I took a couple of friends with me who wanted to go and see what was going on down there as well. We left at 6 o'clock in the morning, which was frighteningly early. One of my friends needed to do something on the way, so we needed to go at early doors. Now, one of the great things about that was it meant that we could have breakfast down there at McDonald's and charge up the car before we even got into the venue. So we got to Farnborough at about 10 to 9. We charged the car and had a McDonald's, and by the time we got out of the McDonald's, the car was 81% full. We didn't have to worry about charging for the rest of the day. So that was really nice, and just goes to show how an MG ZS long range is really capable of doing anything that most people want to do, and the convenience of charging at places like McDonald's and others is going to make it so much easier in future. Then we got into the venue and it was laid out exactly the same as last year, and I was like, oh, okay, is this going to be as good, or am I going to just see the same stuff over and over? Now, fortunately, this didn't happen. When we got into the venue, there were a few companies that were there the same as last year, but there was an obvious lack of sort of tat. So last year there was a lot of charge point companies which I've no idea who these companies are, kind of thing. A lot of kind of like generic charge point manufacturers, and that was not present this year. The market's obviously changing slightly, maturing a little bit, and so there's less of these players that are just trying to make a quick buck off of EV chargers that are around anymore. There was, however, a noticeable increase in the number of companies offering solutions to on-street parking charging. So anyone with a home where there's no driveway and they have to park on the street, there was at least 3 or 4 companies there that I met and spoke with who were offering solutions in this space. A couple of the companies were companies that were just looking at creating some kind of channel from your home to the curbside, so that you didn't have to run a cable across the ground and maybe put some cable protection over it. This was actually dug into the street in a small cut, and then they installed a channel with a flap over the top, so that you could run your cable in, and then once you were done with it, you could pull the cable back out again. But if people were walking over it, they wouldn't notice, even if they were wearing high heels and that kind of stuff. So that was really interesting. The prices seemed to range from about £600 to £900 for installation, and that was with the company sorting out everything with the local authority about actually cutting into the pavement and that kind of thing. But it didn't include any kind of charging technology, so you have to buy your charger. It was literally just a channel in the ground, and that was it. The other 2 companies I met in this space were offering full-on solutions. So Trojan were offering a sort of plug in the ground, which was very inobtrusive when not in use, and then you sort of plugged in a device that allowed you to charge your car from this kind of post. It was quite a short post. I was quite surprised how short it was, because it maybe is the sort of thing that you would trip over it, because it was that sort of short. It probably came up to your knee and no further. I was surprised they didn't make it a bit taller, just so that people didn't sort of bang into it. But it's designed to be installed quite close to the curb, so it's not sort of in the middle of the pavement. It is sort of quite close to the curb. So I guess with that in mind, they probably can avoid having to make it too tall, because then it's obviously a manageable thing for you to carry out and plug in. And the idea is you could plug it into any kind of one of the plugs that they may install in the street, and they would just install a load of them down the street. They did say that you could install it in one way, where it would go to your house and it would use your tariff, and then the other way that they would use it is if they do a deal with the local authority, and then you'd have an app and then you just pay for it, almost like public charging. But just another way of doing public charging, and in a location that's nearer to your home, maybe in your street but not outside your house, and you could check the app and see that there was someone there. They were using a clever computer vision system, so they would install a camera looking at the spaces, but they would only take metadata from the camera. So when you go into the app, you don't see what is on the street. You don't see any of the people's front doors or anything like that. You just see whether the space is available or not. So they're not relaying all of the video to customers using the app, which I thought was a neat solution. I'm not sure. There needs to be a lot of explanation though as to how that's actually working for the members of the public who are seeing a camera being installed in their street, because they might get a bit nervous about the feed of video there. So interesting solution. The other one, which was Urban Fox, they had a thing that just rose up out of the ground like sort of some sort of sci-fi gadget. They were designing them to be installed in up to 6 bays. The idea there that they would be digging a trench, installing the power, installing the bays, but not installing the charge points necessarily. And then as demand sort of dictated, they would then install a number of charge points into each of those bays. So the idea was they could do a lot of civil engineering stuff first, get all of that sorted, and then an installer could come in, a technician, and just install a modular charging unit that rose up out of the ground as required. And there were going to be up to 6 of those in a kind of any given location. It looked really, really nice, the solution. When it's up out of the ground, it's quite big, but you could still obviously in a kind of wide pavement. You could definitely avoid it, but perhaps not suitable to some narrow Victorian streets, like in the centre of a town. But certainly some of your bigger London-wide sort of boroughs, with wide streets, then maybe that's the kind of area that they're going for. But anyway, it's a good solution, and it completely disappears when they're not in use as well. So that was quite cool. One of the other things that we saw in the main hall was the McMurtry Sperling, the very small, very fast fan car. I can't believe how small that car is. It was incredibly small, but it's really, really cool to see it on the myenergi stand in the flesh, so to speak. The other thing that was worthy of note in the main hall was at the Indra stand. Indra had done a big PR piece on their new charger, which is IP67 rated, and they proved it by basically installing it in a fish tank full of water and then switching it on and showing it not blowing up. It was very, very interesting. I had a good conversation about that with some people, because when I had my Wallbox Quasar on the wall of my house, it was in a position where, if I was pressure washing my car, then it could have gotten hit by the blast from the pressure washer. Now, clearly, that's not a good thing, mixing electricity and pressure washers. So, I think the idea that charge points need to be IP67 rated is probably a really, really good selling point for some people. Now, my Zappi version 1 is probably, I'd probably take the cover off it if I blast it with a pressure washer, but it's tucked out of the way, and I'm not worried about it. It's sheltered from the rain and the elements, so it's in a pretty sensible location. But if that's not a possibility for you, then actually this charge point is probably a pretty good idea. Now, in the rest of the main hall, one of the other things that was worth noting was the number of other energy companies that were there represented. There was at least 3 energy companies that I spotted. Obviously Octopus Energy were there, E.ON were also there, and Scottish Power were there, as well as OVO. And they were all trying to sell a kind of integrated picture of energy consumption, solar, heat pumps, battery storage. And that was very different from last year. I don't think I certainly didn't register E.ON, OVO, and I think the only company I saw last year was Octopus Energy. But clearly, with the current state of energy prices, not surprising to see these companies coming out and offering solutions, because I think they are very, very popular right now with consumers trying to save as much as they can on their energy bills. So then we went outside and had a look around. We spent most of the day outside, to be honest. It was a really, really nice day. I saw the EV Experts. They are from Guildford, I believe. They brought a heck of a load of second-hand EVs along, and these were kind of like 2-3-year-old EVs. I think the oldest they had was a Jaguar I-Pace. It was really good value. The range of cars that they had on offer there, second-hand, and the prices were competitive, but it was just really, really good to see people engaging with these second-hand EVs, looking around them and understanding that the prices are coming down, and these are now really, really affordable relatively speaking, really affordable for people to go out and buy. You know, a 2 or 3 year old EV, still with plenty of warranty left on the battery. You know, 8 years in some cases, maybe even a little bit more. So, you know, or the balance of that anyway. So I was really impressed. There was a few EVs that I hadn't seen before. The Mazda MX-30, I think it's called. That was a really interesting car inside. The interior looked amazing. Just a bit of a shame that the battery side was only 35 kilowatts, but it meant that the car was pretty reasonable money. I think maybe under £200 a month if you were going to do a kind of PCP deal, which is pretty good. And the other one they had there was an e-Corsa. Again, very, very good value. I think just over £200 a month if you were doing that on a PCP. So again, quite an affordable way to get into an EV. But yeah, really nice cars. Even the Audi e-trons looked great. Humongous batteries in those cars, like 95 kilowatt hours. I couldn't believe it for the range that they do, like a couple of hundred miles. Where are they putting all those electrons? But they do have 400 brake horsepower. So I guess that's where. Then we moved around to look at the new manufacturers. I didn't get around them all, but one of the massive takeaways there is the Chinese are coming for you. I mean, there was only really the Chinese and the Koreans there, and you know, I don't really count Polestar and MG as not being Chinese because they are Chinese owned, even though one of them kind of hails from Volvo and one of them is an old English brand, but the only thing that's still English about it is the genesis of the brand rather than the vehicle that is made now. It's all made in China. So yeah, the Chinese are really coming into this in a big way. They were really well represented. They had, obviously the MGs were there, the MG4 was there. There was no ZS there. Getting a test drive in them was really difficult because they didn't bring that many cars. But if you want to test drive an MG, just go to your local dealer. You don't really need to go to the Fully Charged show. Other cars that were there, Tesla was there. They had brought tons of test drive cars, so they were doing brisk trade, getting people through those cars. It's really impressive how they were getting the people through. They just took your details, your driver's license, did a few things, and then they just chucked you in the car. They didn't even bother to come out with you. Nissan were there. We test drove an Aria. That was hilarious in comparison to Tesla. They had a breathalyzer test. They had a guy come with you the whole time, so as a consequence of that they could do fewer test drives, so we were glad we got there early and we booked those up. Both cars were very impressive in their own ways. The Aria was gigantic, the Model Y was really well put together. I enjoyed both test drives. I didn't drive them myself, I was with people that were driving them, which gave me a chance to just do a little bit of filming and have a little look at some of the features. The Model Y's software was great. I loved the fact that when you were indicating, it would bring up cameras that would show you down the side of the car just in case there was a cyclist or someone you know, on your inside in the blind spot. So there was really some really nice features that I wasn't aware of until test driving the car. The Auras were there, so the Aura Funky Cat and the Aura Unknown, whatever they're going to call it. But a very premium looking car, looked like a Porsche Taycan, something like that. You know, or maybe like a Panamera, but look a bit like a Panamera. But you know, nice looking car. But you could tell that all of the people working on the design of that car were were ex Porsche, because it basically looked like a Porsche, which is no bad thing. It looked great, but it just goes to show these German manufacturers, they're all going to have to up their game, because these cars are you know, they're coming for their business. BYD were there. They had the Dolphin. It didn't really do anything for me. We didn't really look at it any further, but it was okay. But you know, it was just a little bit kind of boxy. But I'm sure it will sell well if it's cheap enough. But cars like the MG4 have got a little bit of style to them, whether you like it or not. I can't really say that this car had that much style associated with it. Now, one of the other things that was outside, as well as the manufacturers and second-hand car dealers, were the conversion specialists. Now, the conversions that I saw here this year were way better than the ones that I'd seen in previous years. And what's happening in this industry is a little industry is coming up around conversions. So there were a couple of companies there at least who were specialising in specific vehicles, specific conversions, and then making kits for those vehicles. So rather than just going to a garage and saying, hey, can you convert my car to electric, and then have to figure everything out, which is kind of what I saw last year. A couple of exceptions, electric classic cars being one of the exceptions. There was a very much a move to companies who were selling these kits. The most impressive one was the Mini Cooper kit, which was expensive, £25,000 for the kit. But for that, you got absolutely everything you needed to convert your Mini to electric. And if you were a garage, you could buy that kit and fit it within about 20 hours of labour to then sell on to a customer. So that was really nice to see. Definitely the nicest conversion that I've seen at the show, and I think that's a good sign of things to come. I'm quite interested in conversions myself. I do have a Mark 1 Golf, which I'm considering at some point converting. I may do it myself. I may buy a kit. I don't know yet. I certainly don't have the money to do it at the moment, but it would be nice to do in the future. So I'm always interested in these conversions because I used to do a lot of conversions in the past, with petrol engines, but obviously the stuff's moved on now. So it's really, really interesting to see the market spring up about how cars are being converted to electric. And there was a lot of different cars there. There was a Fiat, a Datsun, several sort of old Land Rovers and Range Rovers, and companies were either customers of the kit company or they were doing it themselves. But in the main, I thought some of these conversions were actually really, really looking like a very, very, very good, with subframes and all of the other things that you needed to just almost like bolt in the conversion. So there was no kind of, you didn't have to think about it. It was all there, it was all laid out, just bolt it in, off you go. So that was it from Farnborough this year. I hope you enjoyed just this little look around and what I thought. I'm sure there'll be plenty of others that had been there. If you were there, let me know. What did you think? What were the favourite things that stood out to you? These were just some of the things that stood out to me and some of the things I thought showed a little bit of where the trends were headed. There is another show in Harrogate coming up in a few weeks' time. If you are a Patreon of Fully Charged, then like I am, then you do get a discount on ticket prices, and you also, for Farnborough anyway, got a specific car park dedicated to you. So it's worth checking out when you're buying your tickets, whether you are a Patreon of the Fully Charged show, because you will get some preferential treatment, and everyone likes a bit of preferential treatment from time to time. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like it and share and subscribe and all that jazz, and we'll see you in the next one.